Far to the south, at the very bottom of our terrestrial globe, lies a continent that defies the boundaries of human imagination. It is a place of absolute and unforgiving extremes, a sprawling, unbroken landmass of roughly 14 million square kilometers, almost entirely buried beneath a staggering shield of solid ice, so unfathomably massive that its sheer weight literally depresses the continental bedrock hundreds of meters into the pliable mantle of the Earth. This is Antarctica, the frozen heart of the southern hemisphere. To stand on the high polar plateau is to stand on the surface of an alien world, a desolate and blindingly white landscape where the temperature can routinely plummet to -89 degrees Celsius, where the wind can howl across the flat expanse at over 300 kilometers per hour, and where the sun disappears entirely for 6 months of the year, plunging the jagged peaks and endless plains into an absolute, starlit night. It is a place that seems entirely devoid of life, an endless desert of frozen water that presents the ultimate hostile environment to any biological organism. But the true mystery of Antarctica, the great scientific paradox of this frozen wasteland, does not lie on its freezing, wind-scoured surface. It lies far below. Deep beneath the blinding white expanse, buried beneath 3 to 4 kilometers of solid ancient ice, there is a secret world that has not seen the light of the sun for millions of years. It is a hidden realm of crushing pressure, perpetual darkness, and astonishing isolation. Down in the geological basement of the continent, there is a vast hidden network of rivers, streams, and massive lakes, holding liquid water in a place where common sense dictates that liquid water should simply not exist. And within these hidden waters, sealed away from the rest of the terrestrial biosphere by an impenetrable roof of frozen time, there may be intricate forms of life that no human eye has ever seen, evolving in complete darkness, following rules of biology and survival that we are only just beginning to conceptualize and understand. Before we descend deeper into this dark, frozen world, into the crushing, lightless depths where ancient waters lie sleeping in the bedrock, I want to take a brief moment to welcome you properly. I am Frank, the archaeologist, your dedicated guide through the deeply buried histories and the forgotten silent mysteries of our incredibly complex planet. As we embark on this journey tonight, I want to gently mention that 71.9% of the people watching these explorations have not subscribed to the channel yet. If you genuinely enjoy our deep dives into the past and the hidden corners of the Earth, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel immensely, allowing us to continue uncovering these mesmerizing stories and sharing these quiet moments of discovery together. Now, if you haven't already, dim the lights in your room, take a slow, deep breath, let the noisy, frantic distractions of the modern world completely fade away, and let us travel back through the vast corridors of deep time to a period long before the oppressive ice claimed the southernmost lands of our world. To truly understand the profound magnitude of this hidden subglacial world, we must first shatter the illusion that Antarctica has always been a frozen wasteland. We must step back from the icy present and look clearly at the deep history of this wandering landmass. 50 million years ago, during the early Eocene epoch, the Earth was a fundamentally different planet. It was a greenhouse world, warm, incredibly humid, and teeming with life from the equator to the very poles. Antarctica was positioned at the bottom of the world, much as it is today, but it was not encased in ice. Instead, it was a lush, vibrant continent, carpeted in dense, temperate rainforests of southern beech and giant tree ferns. Rivers meandered through green, fertile valleys, and the air was filled with the calls of ancient birds and the rustling of early mammals. Dinosaur lineages had already passed into history, and in their wake, strange marsupials and enormous flightless birds dominated the dense undergrowth. It was a thriving, interconnected ecosystem, bathed in months of endless summer sunlight and enduring the long, mild darkness of the polar winter without freezing over. The oceans surrounding the continent were warm and shallow, allowing an uninterrupted exchange of thermal energy with the rest of the global climate system, keeping the entire planet remarkably temperate. But the physical geography of our planet is never static. It is always in a state of agonizingly slow, relentless motion. The continents drift upon the tectonic plates, tearing apart and colliding over scales of time that completely dwarf human comprehension. Around 34 million years ago, a monumental shift occurred in the architectural configuration of the Earth. The South American continent, which had long been connected to the long curving spine of the Antarctic peninsula by a narrow terrestrial land bridge, finally broke away and drifted slowly northward. At roughly the same geological moment, the massive Australian landmass was also pulling away from the eastern shores of Antarctica, creeping inexorably toward the warmer equatorial latitudes. These slow, grinding continental separations opened deep, wide oceanic gateways, most notably the treacherous stretch of water we now call the Drake Passage. With nothing left to block the eastward flow of water around the high southern latitudes, a massive, unimaginably powerful ocean current was born. This is the Antarctic Circumpolar Current, a relentless, swirling vortex of freezing water that began to circle the lonely continent in a continuous, unbroken loop. This mighty current acted as an absolute thermal barrier, effectively isolating Antarctica from the warm, tropical waters that had previously swept south to regulate its climate. The planetary thermostat was abruptly turned down, and the long, slow, quiet death of the green continent began in earnest. The freezing of Antarctica was not a sudden cinematic catastrophe. It did not happen overnight in a dramatic flash of frost. It was a slow, inexorable, creeping decline that played out over millions upon millions of years. As the global average temperatures dropped, the soft white snow that fell during the long, dark polar winters simply stopped melting during the increasingly cool and brief summers. Year after year, decade after decade, millennium after millennium, the snow accumulated. It piled up in the deep river valleys, slowly burying the ancient forests, compressing the decaying remnants of the vibrant Eocene biosphere under ever-increasing layers of brilliant, blinding white. As the snow deepened, the immense crushing weight of the overlying layers compressed the delicate, intricate flakes at the very bottom, forcing out the microscopic pockets of trapped air and transforming the soft, powdery snow into dense, crystalline, pale blue glacial ice. This massive ice sheet grew outward from the high Rocky Mountains, spreading across the vast inland plains like a slow-moving, unstoppable flood of solid glass, eventually reaching the jagged coastline and pushing out aggressively into the freezing, turbulent sea. For exactly 34 million years, the ice has ruled this entire continent with absolute authority, building up to a staggering, almost incomprehensible thickness of over 4,000 meters in the deep interior basins, sealing the ancient bedrock away from the atmosphere and plunging the surface of the continent into an eternal, blinding, merciless winter. Looking at this incredibly thick, seemingly unbroken shield of ice today, one might logically and reasonably assume that the freezing process continues consistently all the way down to the solid ancient rock. If the surface temperature regularly drops to -60 degrees Celsius, Surely the ice at the very bottom, buried hundreds or thousands of meters below, must be even colder, permanently locked in a state of absolute, unbreakable, crystalline solidity. How could liquid water possibly exist under such profoundly freezing conditions? The elegant answer lies in a delicate, almost miraculous balance of violent geological forces and the incredibly unique physical and molecular properties of water itself. The Great Ice Sheet is not merely a frozen block. It acts as an unimaginably thick, highly effective insulating blanket draped over the continent. The Earth, despite its cold exterior, is a geologically active planet harboring a violently molten core. Deep beneath the hardened crust, heavy radioactive elements slowly decay, releasing a constant, steady stream of geothermal heat that continuously radiates upward through the rock toward the surface. On a normal continent, this heat simply dissipates and escapes harmlessly into the cold atmosphere. But in Antarctica, this faint but incredibly persistent geothermal heat encounters an impenetrable barrier. Roughly 4 vertical kilometers of solid, dense ice. The massive ice sheet effectively traps the rising heat at the dark boundary layer between the bedrock and the heavy glacier. Furthermore, we must carefully consider the astonishing, bone-crushing pressure exerted by millions of tons of overlying compacted ice. In the peculiar, counterintuitive physics of water, a significant increase in external pressure actually forces the molecules closer together in a way that chemically lowers the freezing point of the liquid. At the very bottom of the massive Antarctic ice sheet, where the environmental pressure can easily exceed 400 times the normal atmospheric pressure we experience walking at sea level, solid ice can melt into liquid water at temperatures several degrees below 0 Celsius. When the trapped ancient geothermal heat steadily rising from the deep rocky mantle of the Earth finally meets the pressure-lowered melting point of the basal ice, a slow, completely silent, and miraculous transformation occurs in the dark. The very bottom layer of the massive glacier begins to melt. It slowly weeps liquid water into the pitch-black void. Over tens of millions of years, this steady, microscopic, relentless melting has gradually accumulated, flowing slowly down into the deep geological depressions, the ancient rift valleys, and the immense forgotten craters of the buried continent, forming vast, dark, silent lakes of liquid water sealed permanently beneath the crushing weight of the ice. The staggering revelation that a complex, dynamic hydrological network actually existed hidden beneath the freezing Antarctic ice is a relatively recent triumph of human scientific ingenuity. For the entire first half of the 20th century, the deep subglacial landscape was an absolute mystery, a massive blank spot on the map of human knowledge, assumed to be nothing more than frozen rock scraped bare by ice. But in the late 1960s and early 1970s, a dedicated international team of brilliant glaciologists and geophysicists began flying specially equipped heavy aircraft back and forth across the desolate, windswept polar plateau. These rugged aircraft were meticulously fitted with sophisticated, highly advanced ice-penetrating radar systems, continuously firing powerful pulses of invisible electromagnetic energy down through the thick ice sheet and carefully recording the faint echoes that bounced back from the hidden bedrock below. They expected to find a rugged, chaotic, mountainous terrain, scraped violently bare by the grinding, relentless movement of the colossal glaciers over deep time. And in many places across the continent, they did indeed find exactly that. But as they flew over the vast, incredibly featureless expanse of East Antarctica, near the exceptionally remote and freezing Soviet research station known globally as Vostok, The delicate radar instruments returned something utterly impossible. Instead of the jagged, scattered, chaotic echoes characteristic of solid, uneven rock, the glowing radar screens displayed a perfectly flat, brilliantly bright horizontal line stretching unbroken for dozens of kilometers through the dark. In the precise science of radar glaciology, a perfectly flat, highly reflective mirror-like interface buried thousands of meters beneath the ice can logically mean only one thing: the sudden boundary between solid, crystalline ice and deep, completely liquid water. It was a breathtaking, paradigm-shifting discovery that fundamentally altered our entire understanding of the planet and its hidden capacities. They had definitively found Lake Vostok, a body of fresh water so massive, so ancient, and so profoundly isolated that it completely defies ordinary human comprehension. Lying nearly 4,000 meters beneath the surface of the vast ice sheet, Lake Vostok is roughly 250 kilometers long and 50 kilometers wide, giving it a total surface area highly comparable to Lake Ontario in North America. In some remote, unexplored places, the dark, freezing waters are over 1,000 meters deep, plunging dramatically into ancient tectonic trenches that easily rival the deepest, most massive freshwater lakes on the sunlit surface of the Earth. And this unimaginable subterranean body of water has been entirely sealed off from the atmosphere, from the warming sun, from the shifting wind, and from the rest of the biological world for perhaps 15 million years. It is an absolute, untouched time capsule, a hidden alien ocean locked in eternal, silent darkness, waiting patiently for the distant moment when we finally possess the technology, the care, and the wisdom to gently look inside without destroying the very mystery we seek to understand. To truly conceptualize the environment of Lake Vostok, we must systematically strip away every single assumption we hold about what constitutes a habitable world. For the vast majority of our planet's evolutionary history, the fundamental driver of the biosphere has been the magnificent energy of the sun. Photons, born in the nuclear furnace of our star, travel across the freezing vacuum of space before striking the emerald surface of a leaf, triggering the chemical cascade of photosynthesis that underpins our sunlit food webs. But beneath the massive crushing shield of the East Antarctic ice sheet, that fundamental universal rule of biology simply ceases to exist. The ice here is not a transparent window. It is a dense, opaque, and entirely impenetrable vault. As you descend through the first few hundred meters of the glacier, the brilliant, blinding white of the polar surface quickly fades into a deep, mesmerizing sapphire blue as the dense ice structure selectively absorbs the longer wavelengths of visible light. Further down, past 1,000 meters, the blue deepens into a heavy twilight indigo, and then, inexorably, it bleeds into absolute, perfect, uncompromising blackness. For the final 3,000 meters of the descent, and throughout the immense volume of the hidden lake itself, there is not a single stray photon of sunlight. It is a realm of eternal, unbroken night that has lasted for perhaps 15 million years. In this staggering abyss of time, no shadow has ever been cast, and no dawn has ever broken. The very concept of a day, a season, or a year is rendered utterly meaningless in a world defined by perpetual silent obscurity. As we drift deeper into this profound, lightless meditation on the extremes of existence, I want to pause the descent for just a fleeting moment. I am Frank, the archaeologist, your quiet companion navigating the hidden silent epochs of our dynamic Earth. It constantly amazes me that 71.9% of the thoughtful individuals who embark on these deep philosophical journeys with us have not yet subscribed to the channel. If you find peace in these slow explorations of alternative realities, please subscribe. Your support is the quiet anchor that allows these stories to continually surface from the dark. Now, let us return to the freezing waters. The absence of light is only the first extreme condition defining this buried ocean. We must also consider the staggering physical pressure. At the bottom of 4 solid kilometers of dense crystalline ice, the physical weight pressing down on the liquid water is unimaginably intense. We are speaking of pressures exceeding 350 times the normal atmospheric pressure we experience breathing the surface air. To place a human body in such an environment without massive engineering would result in instantaneous implosion. Yet, biological organisms, when given sufficient millions of years of uninterrupted evolutionary time, can develop extraordinary structural adaptations. Their cellular membranes become fortified, their internal proteins fold into tighter configurations, and their fundamental biochemistry alters to function perfectly within the crushing embrace of the deep. If life exists in the freezing, lightless expanse of Lake Vostok, it has fundamentally embraced the crushing weight of the world above it. But a profound and lingering question remains. If there is no sunlight to fuel the foundational baseline of the food chain, where does the energy come from to sustain biological complexity? Conventional biology once dictated that a closed system, deprived of photosynthetic input, would inevitably spiral into cold, sterile entropy. However, the Earth is a remarkably complex and generous geological entity. The floor of Lake Vostok is not merely inert, silent rock. It is part of the active, restless crust of a living planet. Far beneath the deep liquid basin, the slow, radioactive decay of the Earth's mantle generates a continuous upward flux of geothermal energy. This ancient subterranean heat slowly percolates through the fractured bedrock, carrying with it a rich, complex dissolution of minerals, heavy metals, and volatile chemical compounds. In the absolute darkness of the lake bed, we might find the slow, silent bubbling of microscopic hydrothermal vents, or the steady, freezing seepage of mineral-rich groundwater. Here, in the absence of the sun, life must turn to the stone itself for sustenance. This is the realm of chemosynthesis, a radically different paradigm of biological survival, where highly specialized microscopic organisms extract their necessary metabolic energy not from falling photons, but by breaking down the strong chemical bonds of inorganic molecules like hydrogen sulfide, methane, or iron. It is a slow, methodical, and incredibly efficient way of existing, drawing the very breath of life from the cold, fractured rocks of the deep Antarctic basement. There is, however, an astonishing paradox hidden within the dark waters of Lake Vostok, a chemical anomaly making its potential biology even more alien. As the overlying ice sheet moves at a glacial pace, it slowly drags microscopic bubbles of trapped atmospheric air down to the basal melting zone. As the bottom layer of the heavy ice melts under pressure, these ancient gases are steadily released directly into the liquid water. Over 15 million years, this slow injection of atmospheric gases, combined with the immense physical pressure forcing these gases to dissolve completely, has resulted in a body of water extraordinarily supersaturated with oxygen. Scientists estimate that the water in Lake Vostok contains dissolved oxygen levels 50 times higher than any typical freshwater lake on the sunlit surface of the Earth. To most surface organisms, this hyperoxygenated environment would be violently toxic. Oxygen in such concentrations is incredibly corrosive, burning through delicate cellular structures and destroying the fragile proteins necessary for life. Therefore, any organism surviving in the depths of Lake Vostok must not only endure absolute darkness, freezing temperatures, and crushing pressure, but it must also navigate an environment practically boiling with reactive oxygen. They would require highly evolved antioxidant defenses, biological armor operating at the molecular level to protect their genetic material from being torn apart by the very element that sustains complex life elsewhere. To imagine the life forms navigating this incredibly hostile environment is to engage in a profound exercise of speculative biology. We are likely not looking for large, swimming leviathans lurking in the dark. The energy constraints of a chemosynthetic, subglacial ecosystem simply cannot support the massive metabolic demands of a complex food web. Instead, we must scale down our vision to the microscopic world of extremophilic bacteria and ancient archaea. In the freezing, hyperoxygenated, crushing darkness, the very pace of life would be agonizingly, beautifully slow. Without the warm, driving rhythm of the sun to accelerate chemical reactions and surviving on the meager chemical energy drawn from the bedrock, these organisms would operate on a metabolic timeline that utterly defies human comprehension. A single cell floating in these silent currents might take decades or perhaps an entire century to gather enough energy to divide just once. They are existing in a state of suspended animation, moving at a glacial tempo, perfectly synchronized with the deep, slow geological rhythms of the isolated continent. They endure the long, dark eons with a molecular resilience that makes our brief, frantic human lives seem like a momentary spark in the vast expanse of deep time. There is a profound sense of philosophical peace to be found in the quiet contemplation of this hidden ecosystem. We constantly look at the universe and assume that complex life must look like us and depend upon the exact same fragile sunlit conditions that birthed our evolution evolution, arrogantly believing we are the ultimate goal of the biological process. But the deep, silent waters of Lake Vostok offer a gentle, powerful, humbling rebuke to that narrow perspective. They remind us with freezing clarity that life is not bound by our localized expectations. Life does not require a blue sky or a warm breeze or the gentle cycle of seasons. It does not require a brain to ponder its existence or an eye to witness its own survival. It simply requires a chemical gradient, a solvent, and the vast, uninterrupted canvas of deep geological time. Knowing that these silent, patient, invisible organisms might be living out their long, dark lives right now, completely oblivious to our existence, to our frantic cities and noisy struggles, is strangely liberating. It frees us from the heavy existential burden of cosmic importance. It allows us to close our eyes, relax our minds, and simply be a small, quiet part of a much larger, endlessly creative and profoundly indifferent universe, spinning slowly in the dark. Standing on the polar plateau at the Russian facility known as Vostok Station requires a physiological resilience bordering on the superhuman. This desolate outpost is the absolute pole of cold, holding the indisputable record for the lowest natural temperature ever directly measured at ground level. On the 21st of July, 1983, instruments here registered a staggering minus 89.2 degrees Celsius. At this profound extreme, physical properties betray you. Steel becomes frighteningly brittle, shattering like cheap glass. The moisture in human breath freezes instantly, falling in a fine shower of microscopic crystals that isolated scientists call the whisper of the stars. It is an environment so hostile, so devoid of warmth, that it feels disconnected from the vibrant biosphere of Earth. Yet, it was precisely here that one of the most audaciously philosophical scientific endeavors in history unfolded. The objective was not initially to find an alien ocean, but simply to bore a vertical hole straight down into the crushing depths of the ice sheet, extracting an unbroken cylinder of frozen history to read the deep climatic record of our world. Before we follow the heavy steel drill bit down into the crushing darkness, I want to take a gentle, quiet moment to speak with you. I am Frank, the archaeologist, your voice in the dark, dedicated to unearthing the hidden temporal layers and the forgotten silent spaces of our magnificent planet. As we descend together into this profound geological mystery, I want to softly remind you that exactly 71.9% of the people who watch and find solace in these explorations have not yet subscribed to the channel. If you find your mind relaxing and your curiosity expanding within these slow atmospheric journeys, please consider subscribing. It helps this channel immensely, providing the quiet, necessary support that allows us to continue bringing these deep contemplative stories to life. Now, let your breathing slow, let the tension release from your shoulders, and let us sink beneath the blinding white surface, following the turning metal down through the eons of compressed time. Deep ice core drilling is an exercise in monumental patience. It is an agonizingly slow, grinding penetration into the solid memory of the Earth. Day after day, the electromechanical drill spun in the dark, biting into the dense pale blue ice, carving out a continuous cylinder roughly 13 centimeters in diameter. With every meter, it traveled further back in time. At 500 meters deep, the ice contained trapped air bubbles from the last glacial maximum, preserving the atmospheric chemistry of a world dominated by woolly mammoths. At 2,000 meters, the ice was hundreds of thousands of years old, an unbroken archive of ancient volcanic eruptions and the slow heartbeat of the planetary climate, swinging between deep freezes and warming interglacials. The drill was reading the pages backwards, plunging deeper into the Pleistocene epoch. But as the drill passed the 3,000-meter mark, the mission shifted. Advanced radar data had revealed the massive liquid presence of Lake Vostok below, and the scientists realized they were actively approaching a fragile, untouched biological frontier. As the borehole extended toward the 3,500-meter mark, a creeping sense of existential dread permeated the scientific community. Drilling was not a clean operation. To prevent the immense pressure of the surrounding ice from collapsing the hole, it had to be continuously filled with a heavy, toxic mixture of aviation kerosene and liquid freon. Over 60 metric tons of this poisonous fluid filled the narrow vertical column. If the drill suddenly broke through the final layer of basal ice and penetrated the lake's ceiling, this massive column of toxic chemicals would rush down into the pristine, hyper-oxygenated water. It would be a catastrophic contamination event, poisoning an isolated ecosystem that had evolved in pristine darkness for perhaps 15 million years. The very act of human curiosity, the burning desire to observe the alien world below, threatened to instantaneously annihilate it before it could be known. It presented a massive philosophical paradox, an ethical threshold demanding an immediate halt. In 1998, operating with a profound restraint that is exceedingly rare in human exploration, the drilling team made the monumental decision to stop. They halted the heavy machinery when the spinning drill bit was approximately 130 meters above the calculated surface of the liquid lake. They left the drill suspended in the freezing fluid, leaving a fragile plug of ancient ice between the polluted human world above and the pristine ocean below. For over a decade, the whole remained suspended in unresolved anticipation. This long, deliberate pause represents a beautiful and humbling moment in modern science. It was an absolute acknowledgement of our destructive potential, a global consensus that some mysteries are too sacred to be violently forced open. During those quiet years, scientists debated how to cross the final threshold without destroying the lake. They needed a method to reach the water without letting the toxic fluid fall. The solution they eventually devised was an elegant manipulation of physics and pressure. The plan, executed in the early weeks of 2012, relied entirely on the massive crushing pressure of the deep ice itself. Engineers calculated that if they carefully adjusted the density of the drilling fluid, making it slightly lighter than the immense pressure of the lake water below, the breakthrough would not result in toxic fluid falling. Instead, the incredible pressure of the hidden ocean would force pristine lake water to violently rush up into the borehole, pushing the kerosene and freon safely upwards. When the specialized thermal drill bit melted through the very last fraction of a millimeter of basal ice, the transition was invisible. Deep in the lightless abyss, 3,769 meters beneath the howling surface, the seal was broken. The hyper-oxygenated ancient water surged upward into the narrow shaft, rising roughly 40 meters before the intense localized cold of the surrounding glacier overpowered it, instantly freezing the ascending column of lake water into a solid, pristine plug of new ice. They had touched the lake without contaminating it. Months later, when the brutal Antarctic winter finally broke and scientists returned, they drilled down into this newly formed plug of frozen lake water, extracting a completely pristine core of ice that had just been liquid water circulating in the dark abyss. Within this precious cylinder of refrozen water lies tantalizing microscopic evidence of life. Initial analyses revealed fragmented genetic signatures of thousands of different bacterial species, whispering of a highly adapted microbial ecosystem thriving in the crushing dark. But the true beauty of this extraordinary endeavor lies in what remains hidden. The overwhelming majority of Lake Vostok remains completely untouched. The drill barely pricked the surface tension of a sprawling subterranean ocean. We've merely tasted a frozen drop of its water. The lake itself still rests in absolute silent obscurity, unaware of the momentary microscopic intrusion from the noisy sunlit world miles above. There is a profound comfort in realizing our planet still holds spaces entirely beyond human hands. In a modern era where almost every square meter of the surface has been mapped by orbiting satellites, the silent, heavy darkness of Lake Vostok stands as a massive monument to the unknown. It reminds us that the Earth is not merely a stage for human activity, but a complex, secretive entity with its own slow internal rhythms and private, isolated sanctuaries. As you lie there, listening to the steady cadence of this narrative, allow your mind to drift down away from the chaotic surface of the world. Imagine the protective weight of 4 kilometers of solid ice resting above you, shielding you from the noise, the light, and the relentless speed of the surface. Imagine the slow, silent, microscopic life drifting in the crushing dark, entirely at peace, requiring nothing but cold rock and ancient water. Feel the immense calming pressure of deep time, the reassuring indifference of a planet that has harbored secrets for millions of years. Allow that ancient silent darkness to wash over you, leaving only a profound quiet wonder at the vastness of the things we do not entirely know. While Lake Vostok stands as the most massive and profoundly isolated emblem of the deep Antarctic mysteries, it is merely the largest sapphire in a sprawling continent-wide crown of hidden waters. For decades, the human imagination conceived of the bedrock beneath the great ice sheet as a sterile, static landscape, a frozen tomb where time itself had irrevocably stopped. But as our radar technologies became ever more sophisticated, piercing the glacial shield with increasingly precise electromagnetic whispers, an entirely different and far more dynamic reality began to slowly emerge from the darkness. The Antarctic basement is not a dry, frozen wasteland. It is a surprisingly wet, complex, and highly active hydrological continent. Beneath the crushing weight of over 27 million cubic kilometers of solid ice, there exists a vast interconnected network of subglacial rivers, sprawling swamps, and over 400 distinct subterranean lakes that we have managed to successfully identify thus far. It is a hidden, shadow version of a living continent, functioning in absolute lightless secrecy. The water down there does not simply sit stagnant in isolated rocky bowls. It moves, driven by the immense varying pressure of the heavy ice above and the subtle rugged topography of the buried mountains below. Liquid water flows from deep interior basins toward the distant continental margins, forging unseen rivers that rival the scale of the mighty terrestrial waterways we know in the sunlit world. Before we follow these dark, silent rivers deeper into the glacial labyrinth, I want to take a brief, calming moment to reconnect with you. I am Frank, the archaeologist, your dedicated guide navigating the shadowed, forgotten corridors of our incredibly complex planet. As we drift through these hidden ancient waters tonight, I want to gently mention that 71.9% of the thoughtful individuals listening to these explorations have not yet subscribed to the channel. If you find your mind expanding and your breathing slowing during our deep dives into the unknown, please consider subscribing. It genuinely helps the channel to grow, ensuring that we can continue to unearth these mesmerizing stories and share these quiet, contemplative journeys together. Now, let your eyes softly close. Let the weight of the day completely dissolve into the quiet atmosphere around you. And let us turn our attention back to the slow, mysterious movement of the dark waters hidden beneath the freezing ice. To understand the profound weirdness of this hidden hydrological network, we must examine a place where the deep buried world violently bleeds out onto the freezing sunlit surface. In the remote, desolate expanse of the McMurdo Dry Valleys, an area of Antarctica entirely scoured of ice by relentless howling katabatic winds, there is a mesmerizing geological anomaly known globally as blood falls. Pouring slowly from the bright, pristine white snout of the massive Taylor Glacier, there's a striking visceral cascade of vibrant crimson-red liquid staining the freezing ice and the rocky valley floor. For over a century, early explorers logically assumed this red color was caused by simple algae blooming in the freezing water. But the truth is far more alien. The red liquid weeping from the face of the glacier is essentially liquid rust, colored by massive concentrations of oxidized iron. But the origin of this iron, and the liquid water itself, completely defies simple explanation. This brine is bleeding out from a deep, ancient subglacial pool trapped beneath the Taylor Glacier, a pool that has been completely isolated from the atmosphere for perhaps 1.5 to 2 million years. It is incredibly hypersaline, containing roughly 3 times the salt concentration of the modern ocean, which prevents it from freezing even when the surrounding temperature drops far below zero. And within this ancient trapped brine, scientists discovered something truly miraculous. A thriving, highly specialized community of extremophilic bacteria surviving in absolute darkness, devoid of oxygen and metabolizing iron to generate their necessary energy. When this ancient iron-rich water is finally forced out to the glacier's edge by the immense pressure of the moving ice, it reacts violently with the oxygen in the sunlit atmosphere, instantly oxidizing into the shocking, bright red rust that stains the pristine glacial valley. Bloodfalls is essentially a slow, continuous leak from a buried alien biosphere, a visceral reminder that life finds a way to endure in the most punishing, restrictive environments our planet has to offer. But the trapped brine beneath the Taylor Glacier is merely an isolated puddle compared to the massive active hydrological systems operating deep within the interior of West Antarctica. Here, massive rivers of liquid water flow swiftly beneath the ice, moving between active subglacial lakes in sudden dramatic drainage events that can completely alter the flow velocity of the overlying ice streams. Unlike a normal river flowing under the open sky, a subglacial river is forced both uphill and downhill, driven entirely by the immense crushing pressure gradients of the thousands of meters of ice pressing down from above. These dark rivers can suddenly burst forth when an upstream lake reaches its maximum capacity, forcing billions of liters of water through narrow freezing tunnels at the base of the ice, filling lakes further downstream in a cascading flood that is entirely invisible to anyone standing on the blinding white surface. To investigate these active moving ecosystems, scientists targeted Lake Mercer, a deep subglacial body of water lying 800 meters beneath the Whillans ice plain. Unlike the massive, isolated, and ancient Lake Vostok, Lake Mercer is a dynamic, hydrologically active environment, continually receiving and releasing water through the vast subglacial network. When a sterilized hot water drill penetrated the thick roof of Lake Mercer in early 2019, what researchers discovered fundamentally rewrote the textbooks. They did not just find the expected fragmented signatures of sparse extremophile bacteria. They found the remarkably well-preserved, delicate microscopic shells of diatoms, ancient photosynthetic algae that could only have grown when the ocean waters were freely open to the sun. Even more astonishingly, they recovered the microscopic, degraded physical remains of tiny crustaceans and tardigrades, complex multicellular organisms deep within the lightless, freezing mud. The profound implication is staggering. These organisms likely thrived thousands or perhaps millions of years ago, during brief warm interglacial periods when the massive ice sheet temporarily retreated, allowing the shallow oceans to flood the deep continental basins. When the ice inevitably returned, advancing relentlessly across the landscape, it sealed these marine ecosystems away, trapping their physical remains in the freezing dark. The bacteria living in Lake Mercer today are not just surviving on ancient bedrock, they are actively feeding on the fossilized carbon remains of the vibrant, sunlit world that was violently buried millions of years ago. It is a slow, freezing ecosystem built entirely upon the scattered ruins of a forgotten ancient ocean. This profound interconnectedness, this slow, dark circulation of water and ancient life beneath the ice, forces us to completely reevaluate our understanding of planetary isolation. We look at the unbroken, blinding expanse of the Antarctic surface and see nothing but sterile, frozen silence. But beneath that deceptive shield, the continent is breathing, it is shifting, weeping, and circulating. The water moving through these deep, dark corridors carries the chemical memories of ancient oceans, the dissolved minerals of the continental bedrock, and the incredibly resilient, slow-moving biology of extremophilic life. A single molecule of water, trapped in the crushing pressure of the subglacial network, might take tens of thousands of years to slowly travel from the deep interior of East Antarctica to finally emerge at the chaotic, calving edge of the Ross ice shelf. It operates on a temporal scale that completely mocks our frantic human perception of time. While we measure our lives in decades and our history in mere centuries, the hidden hydrology of Antarctica measures its flow in the slow, agonizing march of geological epochs. The bacteria waiting in the freezing dark, metabolizing iron and fossilized carbon, do not hurry, they simply endure. They embrace the cold, they accept the crushing pressure, and they exist in perfect harmony with the slow, relentless rhythms of the heavy ice above them. There is a profound, comforting lesson hidden within this extreme biology. We spend so much of our conscious lives fighting against the constraints of our environment, constantly rushing, constantly building, constantly trying to escape the inevitable pull of time. But the life forms hidden deep within the Antarctic basement show us an entirely different path. They show us the deep, quiet power of endurance, the elegant beauty of slowing down to match the rhythm of the earth itself. As you lie there, safe and warm in your own space, try to internalize the vast, profound slowness of that dark, buried world. Imagine the water, black and heavy, moving incredibly slowly through the microscopic fractures in the ancient bedrock, far beneath the howling winds of the surface. Feel the absolute stillness of a place that has not felt the warmth of the sun for over 15 million years. Let the frantic, anxious thoughts of your day sink down into that heavy, freezing water, dissolving completely into the immense, quiet dark. The world above may be chaotic and demanding, but down in the secret places of the earth, there is only the slow, eternal patience of ice, rock, and ancient, sleeping water. Allow your breathing to match that slow, geological rhythm. Breathe in the cold, clear peace of the deep, and breathe out the noise of the surface. You are safe, you are grounded, and the ancient ice is holding the quiet secrets of the world perfectly, silently, still. To comprehend the majesty of the Antarctic ice sheet, we must stop thinking of it merely as frozen water and understand it as the most profound physical memory bank our planet possesses. In the sunlit world we inhabit, history is remarkably fragile. The relentless forces of wind, rain, biological decay, and tectonic subduction are constantly erasing the past, grinding mountains into sand, and turning ancient civilizations to dust. Our terrestrial world is a landscape of profound amnesia, forever overwriting its own story with the chaotic growth of the present. But here, in the absolute desolation of the Deep South, normal rules of terrestrial erasure simply do not apply. The ice sheet is a master archivist, a silent vault that captures everything that falls upon its freezing surface and holds it in suspended animation for millions of years. Every single snowflake that has fallen on the high polar plateau over the last 34 million years has carried with it a microscopic, perfect sample of the atmosphere from the exact moment it crystallized in the sky. Dust blown from the high deserts of South America, microscopic ash particles from violent volcanic eruptions, and even the faint isotopic signatures of distant supernovas exploding in the cosmos. All of it is captured, buried, and preserved with absolute fidelity within the crystalline structure of the heavy glacier. The ice does not forget. It simply swallows the passing eons, compressing time itself into dense layers of pale blue silence. Before we delve deeper into this monumental frozen archive of planetary history, I want to take a gentle, quiet moment to reconnect with you. I am Frank, the archaeologist, your dedicated guide through the forgotten epochs and the silent, shadowed corners of our incredibly complex world. As we wander together through these ancient crystalline memories, I want to softly mention that exactly 71.9% of the thoughtful individuals who find solace in these deep explorations have not yet subscribed to the channel. If you find your mind expanding and your anxieties dissolving within these slow atmospheric journeys, please consider subscribing. It genuinely helps the channel to grow, providing the quiet, necessary support that allows us to continue unearthing these mesmerizing stories and sharing these contemplative moments together. Now, let your breathing align with the slow rhythm of the ancient ice. Let the chaotic noise of your day fade, and let us continue our descent into the profound memory of the earth. The memory of the ice is dynamic, functioning as a slow-moving conveyor belt operating on a temporal scale that mocks human perception. The ice sheet constantly flows, creeping outward from the high central domes toward the continental margins under the unyielding pressure of its staggering weight. This flow is agonizingly slow, moving perhaps only a few meters every year. But multiplied by millions of years, the result is a geological force of unimaginable power. As the deep ice flows outward, it occasionally encounters the buried peaks of the Antarctic mountains, a colossal mountain range stretching for thousands of kilometers across the continent. When the flowing ice hits this solid bedrock barrier, it is forced violently upward. In remote areas, howling katabatic winds constantly scour the surface, sublimating the upwelling ice directly into water vapor without ever melting it. This violent wind erosion strips away younger upper layers, exposing ancient deep blue ice buried for hundreds of thousands of years. These blue ice areas are some of the most alien, scientifically significant landscapes on the planet. And it is here, resting silently on the hard, polished surface, that the glacier surrenders its most extraordinary secrets. Because the ice sheet captures absolutely everything from the sky, it is the greatest collector of cosmic debris on Earth. For millions of years, meteorites have fallen from the freezing vacuum of space, landing softly in the deep snow of the Antarctic plateau. In any other environment, these dark stones would be rapidly buried by shifting soil or obscured by vegetation. But in Antarctica, they are instantly swallowed by pristine white snow, perfectly preserved in the cold and slowly carried downward into the crushing depths. They travel silently through the dark heart of the ice sheet for eons, completely isolated from erosive forces. When the flowing ice is finally forced upward against hidden mountain peaks and the surface is violently scoured away, these ancient heavy meteorites are left sitting perfectly exposed on the bright reflective surface of the blue ice. They are concentrated by the slow mechanics of the glacier, waiting silently for human eyes to finally recognize them. To walk across a blue ice field is to walk across a physical manifestation of deep time, where boundaries between the Earth and the vast dark cosmos completely dissolve. You can bend down and pick up a heavy blackened stone forged in the violent chaotic birth of our solar system 4.6 billion years ago. A stone that wandered through the freezing silence of interplanetary space before finally colliding with our world. And you can hold that cosmic traveler while standing upon solid water that fell from the terrestrial sky 1,000,000 years before the first human ancestor ever learned to walk upright. It is a profound, dizzying collision of unimaginable timescales. A physical space where the ancient history of the stars and the deep history of our planet are perfectly preserved side by side in the unyielding grip of the ice. The scale of this preservation forces a re-evaluation of our human importance. We build stone monuments and digital libraries in a desperate attempt to make our brief existence permanent, ensuring we are not forgotten by the relentless march of time. But all our greatest architectural achievements and deepest historical records are heartbreakingly fragile compared to the silent, unfeeling memory of the Antarctic ice sheet. Yet, there is a strange comfort in acknowledging this disparity. When we accept the immense scale of geological time, the overwhelming anxieties of our daily lives lose their sharp, painful edges. The missed deadlines, the social embarrassments, the complex pressures of modern human existence, they all seem infinitely small and completely inconsequential when placed against the silent, freezing backdrop of a continent preserving the dust of shattered stars for 34 million years. The ice does not judge our failures, it does not celebrate our victories, and it does not care about our noisy struggles. It simply exists in a state of perfect indifference, following the immutable laws of thermodynamics and gravity, moving at a pace demanding absolute, unwavering patience. This complete indifference is not cruel. It is profoundly liberating. It frees us from the exhausting burden of believing our individual actions must hold cosmic significance. It allows us to simply exist, to be small, transient, and perfectly ordinary, recognizing we are just a fleeting spark of consciousness in a universe defined by deep, silent eons. Imagine the resonant silence of that ancient blue ice. It is a silence so absolute and heavy that it almost has a physical weight, pressing gently against your skin and sinking deep into your bones. Far beneath that hard, polished surface, the heavy glacier is still slowly, imperceptibly moving, grinding against buried bedrock with a sound too vast for human ears to comprehend. And even further down, in the crushing darkness at the very bottom of the world, the hidden lakes remain perfectly still, their ancient waters holding microscopic, slow-moving life. It is a world characterized by perfect, uninterrupted stability. Nothing changes quickly here. The violent storms raging across the surface cannot penetrate the deep, silent core of the glacier. The frantic turning of the earth, the rising and setting of the distant sun, the chaotic flourishing and dying of the global biosphere, none of it matters in the deep, heavy dark. There is only cold, pressure, and the eternal passage of geological time. As you lie resting now, listening to the steady, unhurried cadence of my voice, allow your own mind to adopt the profound stillness of that ancient ice. Let your active thoughts slow down, matching the glacial pace of the frozen continent. Let your worries and fears be slowly covered by falling snow, buried deeper until they are completely compressed into a silent, distant memory. You do not need to hold on to the chaotic events of the day. Release them into the vast, indifferent expanse of the polar night. Feel the comforting pressure of gravity holding you against the earth, just as the immense weight of the ice holds ancient water safe in the dark. Allow the deep peace of the frozen world to completely envelop you, wrapping you in a blanket of absolute stillness. Breathe in the cold, ancient air of the deep south, and breathe out the exhausting noise of the modern world. You are completely safe here, floating gently on the edge of sleep, supported by the deep, unyielding strength of a planet that has been slowly turning in the dark for billions of years. Let the silence take you. Let the ancient ice hold you, and simply allow yourself to drift, untethered and entirely at peace, into the deep, quiet spaces of your own resting mind. To fully comprehend the hidden, dynamic reality of the Antarctic continent, we must completely abandon the comforting, simplistic illusion that it is merely a static, frozen monolith resting quietly at the bottom of the world. Our human senses, tuned exclusively to the warm, sunlit surface of the earth, frequently deceive us into believing that this crushing, blindingly white landscape is defined entirely by the absolute, unwavering absence of heat. But the Earth is a fundamentally restless, violently active, and thermally dynamic machine, powered continuously by the slow, relentless radioactive decay of heavy elements deep within its molten core. This immense internal heat constantly seeks an escape route to the cold surface, and the massive tectonic plates that comprise the rocky crust of our planet are frequently fractured, torn, and stretched by these convective forces. Deep beneath the western half of the Antarctic ice sheet lies a monumental geological feature that remains almost entirely invisible to human eyes: the West Antarctic Rift System. It is one of the most massive continental rift valleys on the entire planet, a colossal jagged scar in the bedrock where the tectonic plate is slowly, agonizingly tearing itself apart. This immense geological tension creates a region of heavily thinned crust, allowing the boiling, superheated magma from the mantle to rise dangerously close to the freezing, icy surface. We are looking at a landscape defined by an impossible paradox: an active volcanic province buried alive under millions of tons of solid, creeping ice. Before we journey closer to these hidden subterranean fires, descending into the dark, crushing pressure where freezing water meets molten rock, I want to take a slow, quiet moment to speak directly to you. I am Frank, the archaeologist, your dedicated guide through the forgotten, silent spaces and the deep, hidden histories of our magnificent world. As we drift through this incredible juxtaposition of fire and ice tonight, I want to gently mention that exactly 71.9% of the thoughtful individuals who find peace in these explorations have not yet subscribed to the channel. If your mind is expanding and your physical tension is slowly dissolving within these atmospheric journeys, please consider subscribing. It genuinely provides the vital support that allows this channel to continue unearthing these mesmerizing stories and sharing these profound, quiet moments with you. Now, take a slow, deep breath. Let the heavy, chaotic noise of your day completely fade away into the dark, and let us follow the rising heat down into the freezing, hidden depths of the continent. To visualize the sheer scale of this hidden volcanic world, we must look at the meticulous data gathered by scientists, dragging advanced ice-penetrating radar across the desolate, windswept surface of the West Antarctic ice sheet. Beneath the endless, featureless white plains, they've discovered an astonishing hidden topography of towering, jagged peaks and deep, plunging calderas. They have identified at least 138 individual volcanoes slumbering in the dark, making this region one of the densest, most concentrated volcanic provinces on Earth, rivaling the famous volcanic ranges of East Africa or the chaotic tectonic margins of the Pacific Ring of Fire. Many of these buried mountains are absolutely massive, rising thousands of meters from the deep continental bedrock, yet they remain completely entombed, their towering summits still buried beneath a kilometer or more of solid, flowing ice. They stand in perfect pitch-black darkness, silent sentinels born of fire, endlessly fighting a losing battle against the crushing, freezing weight of the overlying glacier. But these volcanoes are not all dead, silent monuments of a forgotten geological past. Some of them are actively stirring, generating immense localized geothermal heat anomalies that fundamentally alter the physical structure and the slow, creeping flow of the massive ice sheet resting heavily above them. Imagine the sheer, terrifying physics of an eruption occurring completely hidden from the sun, buried under 3 kilometers of solid ice. When the superheated magma finally breaches the fractured crust, There is no spectacular cinematic explosion of ash and fire into the sky. The crushing, immense physical pressure of the heavy glacier prevents the rapid expansion of volatile gases. Instead, the incredible localized heat encounters the absolute cold of the basal ice, initiating a rapid, violent melting process in the pitch-black dark. The volcano essentially melts a colossal cavernous dome into the underside of the heavy glacier, creating a massive temporary subglacial lake filled with highly pressurized, superheated liquid water. This churning water cannot easily escape the unyielding dome of the surrounding ice. It becomes a violent, boiling cauldron, trapped in the crushing dark, absorbing massive quantities of dissolved minerals, toxic heavy metals, and volatile sulfur compounds directly from the cooling, fractured magma. It is an environment of absolute chaos, a hidden, violent storm of chemistry and heat raging silently in the deep geological basement, entirely disconnected from the peaceful, freezing, sunlit surface miles above. Within these transient, superheated subglacial lakes, the chemistry of life takes on a radically different alien paradigm. Just as we have discovered thriving, complex ecosystems clustered tightly around the boiling, toxic hydrothermal vents in the abyssal trenches of the deep ocean, scientists strongly suspect that similar, deeply isolated chemosynthetic oases must exist around these subglacial Antarctic volcanoes. Here, in the absolute crushing darkness, microscopic life does not depend on the gentle falling photons of the distant sun. Instead, highly specialized, resilient extremophilic bacteria draw their vital metabolic energy directly from the violent chemical reactions of the volcanic vents. They feast eagerly on the dissolved hydrogen sulfide, the heavily oxidized iron, and the abundant streams of methane gas bubbling up continuously from the cooling, fractured magma below. These organisms, known as hyperthermophiles, are biological anomalies that actually require temperatures near or even above the normal boiling point of water just to survive and reproduce. They form thick, vibrant living mats over the fresh, jagged volcanic rock, creating a dense, localized biological bloom in a place that should, by all traditional biological rules, be entirely sterile and dead. Yet, the most fascinating aspect of these subglacial volcanic ecosystems is their absolute, heartbreaking transience. A volcano does not erupt forever. Eventually, the deep magma chamber empties or seals, the tectonic pressure shifts, and the immense localized heat slowly begins to fade. As the heat dissipates into the surrounding rock, the crushing, infinite cold of the massive overlying glacier aggressively reclaims its territory. The cavernous dome of melted water slowly, inexorably begins to freeze solid once again. The heavy ice creeps downward, narrowing the habitable space, slowly shutting off the vital chemical flow of the hydrothermal vents. The vibrant, thriving colonies of hyperthermophilic bacteria are suddenly faced with an environment that is rapidly cooling and solidifying. To survive, they must undergo a radical, desperate physiological transformation. They cease their frantic metabolic activity, expel excess water from their delicate cellular structures, and form incredibly tough, dormant spores, effectively pausing their own biological existence. They allow themselves to be slowly, violently entombed in the freezing ice, entering a state of profound suspended animation that can last for tens of thousands or perhaps even millions of years. There is a profound, almost melancholic beauty in this hidden cycle of transient life and endless, freezing dark. It represents a biosphere existing on the absolute, razor-thin margins of possibility. These microscopic organisms wait in silent, frozen stasis for millennia, trapped in the crushing blue ice, entirely dependent on the random, unpredictable awakening of a buried volcano to grant them a brief, frantic window of warmth and liquid water. When the fire finally returns, they bloom with incredible, desperate vitality, building their complex chemical societies in the dark, only to be inevitably crushed and frozen once more when the geological fever breaks. This cycle has likely repeated thousands of times over the last 34 million years, a slow, silent, heavy heartbeat of deep life playing out entirely unobserved by human eyes. It forces us to reconsider our rigid definitions of habitable zones and planetary carrying capacity. It proves that life is not a fragile, delicate phenomenon requiring perfect, sunlit conditions, but a resilient, tenacious force capable of hiding in the most hostile, punishing environments, waiting with infinite patience for the precise moment to awaken. This deep geological patience is completely antithetical to the rapid, frantic, and anxious pace of our modern human existence. We constantly demand immediate results, instant communication, and continuous, unbroken progress. We panic when our artificial, carefully controlled environments fluctuate by even a few degrees. But the extremophiles resting silently in the deep Antarctic ice know nothing of this frantic haste. They operate on a timescale defined by the slow drift of continents and the rare, majestic pulses of subterranean magma. As you lie resting in your own quiet space, listening to the steady, unhurried cadence of this narrative, allow your own tired mind to gently adopt the profound, ancient patience of that hidden, subterranean world. Let the urgent, chaotic demands of your day completely dissolve into the vast, freezing dark. Imagine the immense, comforting weight of the 3-kilometer-thick ice sheet gently pressing down, insulating you from the noise, the light, and the exhausting speed of the surface world. Feel the slow, deep, reliable heat radiating from the ancient rock beneath you. You do not need to rush. You do not need to produce or react or constantly move forward. You are allowed to simply exist, suspended in the quiet dark, entering a state of peaceful, restorative dormancy. Breathe in the cold, clear, ancient peace of the deep south, and breathe out the frantic, exhausting energy of the modern world. You are completely safe here, held securely between the ancient fires of the earth and the eternal silent ice. Let the heavy darkness take you. Let the ancient silence hold you, and simply allow yourself to drift, untethered and entirely at peace, into the deep, quiet spaces of your own resting mind. To human perception, a mountain is defined almost entirely by its interaction with the sky. We conceptualize mountains as towering monuments of tectonic triumph that pierce the clouds, catch the golden rays of early dawn, and stand as highly visible symbols of terrestrial endurance. They are the majestic, sunlit crowns of our planet. But what if a mountain range, comparable in sheer scale and staggering majesty to the European Alps, was entirely stripped of its sky? What if the highest, most jagged peaks and the deepest river valleys were violently plunged into absolute, crushing, eternal darkness? Deep within the frozen heart of East Antarctica, buried completely beneath a staggering 3,000 meters of solid, pale blue ice, lies a geographical impossibility that fundamentally challenges our understanding of the natural world. This is the Gamburtsev subglacial mountain range, a vast, violent spine of stone tearing through the center of the continent, yet entirely invisible to any satellite camera or human eye scanning the blinding white surface. To stand on the freezing polar plateau above them is to stand on a perfectly flat, unbroken plain of white ice, completely unaware that miles beneath your boots lies an unimaginably complex labyrinth of towering peaks, plunging ravines, and ancient, frozen alpine valleys. Before we delve deeper into the dark, silent valleys of these ghost mountains and explore the profound geological paradox they represent, I want to gently pause and reconnect with you. I am Frank, the archaeologist, your quiet, dedicated companion navigating the hidden, silent epics and the profoundly buried mysteries of our dynamic Earth. As we embark on this surreal journey into the crushing darkness tonight, I want to gently mention that exactly 71.9% of the thoughtful individuals who watch these explorations and find peace in these stories have not subscribed to the channel yet. If you genuinely enjoy our deep dives into the past and the hidden silent corners of the Earth, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel immensely, allowing us to continue uncovering these mesmerizing stories and sharing these quiet, contemplative moments of discovery together. Now, if you have not done so already, please dim the lights in your room, take a slow, deep, stabilizing breath. Let the noisy, frantic distractions of the modern world completely fade away, and let us sink through the thick ice to walk among the buried giants. The initial discovery of the Gamburtsev subglacial mountains is a testament to the sheer audacity of mid-20th century human exploration. In the late 1950s, during the globally coordinated scientific effort known as the International Geophysical Year, a heavily equipped Soviet expedition set out across the most remote, punishing sector of the Antarctic interior. Their destination was the pole of inaccessibility, the exact point on the continent furthest from any surrounding ocean. As they navigated their heavy tracked vehicles across the flat, featureless, blindingly white expanse of the ice sheet, they dragged sophisticated seismic equipment and gravimeters behind them. They expected their instruments to reveal exactly what the surface suggested: a massive, incredibly flat bedrock plain, crushed downward by the staggering weight of the ice. But as they approached the absolute center of the continent, the delicate instruments returned chaotic, impossible readings. The gravity anomalies spiked wildly, and the seismic echoes bouncing back from the deep bedrock indicated massive, towering structures of solid rock soaring aggressively upward into the heavy ice. The scientists were stunned. They had inadvertently stumbled upon an entire mountain range, spanning over 1,200 kilometers in length and reaching elevations of over 3,000 meters, completely entombed in the middle of a frozen nowhere. For decades following their astonishing discovery, the Gamburtsev Mountains stood as one of the most frustrating geological paradoxes on the entire planet. The fundamental laws of plate tectonics dictate that massive mountain ranges form at the violently active edges of tectonic plates, where continents collide, much like the slow crashing of India into Asia that is pushing the Himalayas into the sky. But the Gamburtsevs are located dead center within the East Antarctic Shield, an ancient, incredibly stable craton that has not experienced any significant tectonic collision for over 500 million years. Finding a young, jagged alpine mountain range in the middle of a billion-year-old stable tectonic plate breaks the fundamental rules of geology. How does a massive mountain range violently grow in the absolute center of a dead plate? The answer to this deep mystery requires us to stretch our imaginations backward across staggering eons of deep time, long before the dinosaurs walked the earth. Over 1 billion years ago, the ancient wandering landmasses of the Earth violently collided to form the forgotten supercontinent of Rodinia. In the brutal impact of that ancient collision, a massive mountain range was violently thrust into the sky. But in the terrestrial world, mountains are inherently tragic structures. The very moment they rise, the atmosphere begins to relentlessly tear them down. Over hundreds of millions of years, those ancient mountains were completely eroded away, ground down to a flat, featureless plain. However, the immense, incredibly heavy root of that ancient mountain range remained stubbornly embedded deep within the pliable mantle of the earth, sitting completely dormant for eons. Hundreds of millions of years later, when the giant supercontinent of Gondwana finally began to aggressively rip itself apart, the tectonic tension stretched the ancient Antarctic crust. Like a highly compressed spring suddenly released from a trap, the dense root of the forgotten mountains violently rebounded. The crust was pushed upward, and the ghost mountains were resurrected from the dead, rising jagged and tall into the sky once more, just millions of years before the climate crashed and the long freezing night of the Ice Age began. When the Antarctic climate shifted 34 million years ago, the growing ice sheet did not destroy these resurrected mountains. In a normal environment, a massive glacier acts like a destructive river of sandpaper, violently grinding mountains down into smooth hills, erasing their jagged peaks. But the climate in the deep interior of Antarctica became so unfathomably cold that the ice did not slide over the mountains. Instead, the very bottom of the massive ice sheet simply froze solid to the cold bedrock. The ice became a perfect, immobile, protective cast, wrapping itself gently around every jagged peak and deep plunging valley. The Gamburtsev Mountains were perfectly preserved by it. For 34 million years, they have not felt the touch of rain, the howling of the wind, or the destructive force of flowing water. They are a preserved fossil of an entire landscape, frozen exactly as they looked on the very last day the sun touched their rocky slopes. They have been removed entirely from the relentless flow of normal terrestrial time. There is a profound, incredibly powerful philosophical peace to be found in the quiet contemplation of these ghost mountains. We humans are a deeply visual, anxious species. We constantly demand that our achievements, our monuments, and our existence be seen and validated by the world around us. We fear the dark, we fear being forgotten, and we constantly struggle against the relentless erosion of time. But the Gamburtsev Mountains offer a quiet, majestic rebuke to our frantic nature. They are arguably the most perfectly preserved, breathtakingly majestic structures on the planet, yet they exist in absolute pitch-black darkness. They require no human eyes to validate their terrifying beauty. They need no sunlight to cast long shadows across their slopes. They simply exist, perfectly still, locked in the freezing, eternal embrace of the deep ice. They represent an indestructible, silent core of stability in a violently chaotic, constantly changing world. As you lie resting now, listening to the steady cadence of this narrative, allow your own tired, racing mind to gently adopt the profound stillness of those buried, silent mountains. Let the urgent, chaotic demands of your day and the exhausting expectations of the bright surface world completely dissolve into the vast freezing dark. Imagine the immense comforting weight of the 3-kilometer-thick ice sheet gently pressing down above you, perfectly insulating you from the noise, the light, and the relentless speed of the surface world. You do not need to constantly fight against the erosion of time. You do not need to be constantly seen or constantly validated to possess profound inherent worth. Deep within you, there is an unerodable, silent core of peace, a quiet mountain range of the mind that the storms of the surface can never reach. Breathe in the cold, clear, ancient peace of the deep south, and breathe out the frantic energy of the modern world. You are completely safe here, held securely in the ancient frozen dark. Let the heavy darkness gently take you. Let the ancient silence softly hold you, and simply allow yourself to drift, untethered and entirely at peace, into the deep, quiet, unmoving spaces of your own resting mind. To truly grasp the profound magnitude of the biological reality buried beneath the Antarctic ice sheet, we must fundamentally reconsider our deeply ingrained human understanding of environmental isolation. In the sunlit world that we inhabit, true isolation is practically a physical impossibility. The terrestrial biosphere is an incredibly chaotic, relentlessly interconnected web of constant physical and chemical exchange. The mighty ocean currents endlessly circulate deep marine waters from the freezing Arctic to the warm tropical equator, carrying billions of microscopic plankton and dissolved nutrients with them. The powerful atmospheric jet streams violently sweep across towering mountain ranges, transporting fine dust, resilient fungal spores, and microscopic bacteria across vast, sprawling continents. Even the most remote oceanic islands are routinely visited by migrating birds carrying seeds or by floating debris, acting as unpredictable life rafts. Everything on the surface is constantly touching, constantly mixing, and constantly sharing genetic information in a noisy, frantic, never-ending biological conversation. But the deep hidden lakes and the dark flowing rivers beneath the massive Antarctic glacier represent a violent, absolute severing of this global connection. When the heavy, creeping ice sheet finally sealed these deep basins shut millions of years ago, it did not just trap ancient water, it effectively quarantined an entire independent branch of the terrestrial tree of life, locking it in an impenetrable vault of solid, freezing crystal. Before we dive deeper into the microscopic, silent battles and the incredibly slow evolutionary paths of these deeply isolated organisms, I want to take a soft, unhurried moment to speak directly to you. I am Frank, the archaeologist, your dedicated, quiet guide through the forgotten, silent spaces and the profoundly buried mysteries of our complex Earth. As we drift together through this mesmerizing, freezing darkness tonight, I want to gently mention that exactly 71.9% of the thoughtful individuals who find peace and intellectual comfort in these deep explorations have not yet subscribed to the channel. If your mind is expanding and your physical tension is slowly dissolving within these slow atmospheric journeys, please consider subscribing. It genuinely provides the vital, quiet support that allows this channel to continue unearthing these profound stories and sharing these contemplative, relaxing moments with you. Now, take a slow, deep, stabilizing breath. Let the heavy, chaotic noise of your modern day completely fade away into the distant dark, and let us follow the thread of evolution into the absolute, freezing silence. Let us place this staggering isolation into a proper, humbling geological perspective. Think about the catastrophic, world-altering events that have violently reshaped the surface of the Earth since the deep Antarctic lakes were finally sealed. Massive, towering supervolcanoes have erupted, choking the entire global atmosphere with thick, blocking ash and plunging the sunlit world into sudden, brutal volcanic winters. The massive, grinding tectonic plates have violently collided, pushing up entirely new, jagged mountain ranges and completely altering the fundamental circulation of the global oceans. The great cyclical ice ages of the Pleistocene have relentlessly pulsed back and forth, dragging massive, crushing glaciers across the northern hemisphere, violently driving countless species to brutal, freezing extinction. And of course, the entire frantic, chaotic, and incredibly brief history of the human species has played out. We have evolved from small, frightened primates shivering in the tall grass to a globally dominant, hyper-technological civilization capable of splitting the atom and leaving footprints on the dusty, silent surface of the moon. Yet, down in the crushing absolute blackness of Lake Vostok and the deep subglacial network, absolutely nothing of consequence has happened. The microscopic organisms drifting slowly in the hyperoxygenated freezing water did not feel the violent meteor strikes. They did not notice the dramatic swinging shifts in the global climate. They had been completely insulated from the frantic, bloody chaos of surface evolution. Their world is defined by a terrifying, beautiful, and absolutely uncompromising physical stability. In this environment of absolute, unchanging stability, the very mechanics of biological evolution must operate under a radically different set of rules. On the surface, the rapid, chaotic changes in the environment constantly force species to adapt, mutate, and compete in a desperate, endless race for survival. But in the deep, silent lakes beneath the ice, the environment does not change. The crushing pressure remains exactly the same. The absolute absence of sunlight remains exactly the same. The slow, steady percolation of geothermal minerals remains exactly the same. Without the violent stress of a changing environment, the intense pressure to rapidly evolve simply disappears. The life forms trapped in the deep dark enter a state of profound evolutionary stagnation. They undergo a process that scientists refer to as genetic drift, where slow, random microscopic mutations accumulate at an agonizingly glacial pace, not driven by a desperate need to adapt to new dangers, but simply by the inevitable slow ticking of the biological clock. They are the ultimate conservative organisms, fiercely maintaining the exact same fundamental biochemical strategies that allowed their distant ancient ancestors to survive the initial freezing burial millions of years ago. However, to say that this deep, isolated world is entirely peaceful would be a fundamental biological misunderstanding. Even in the absolute freezing darkness, the fundamental ancient war of life continues, albeit at a pace that utterly defies our human comprehension. Wherever you find complex bacterial colonies, you will inevitably find viruses. Deep within the isolated subglacial lakes, there exists a hidden, microscopic battleground between the ancient bacteria and the specialized predatory viruses known as bacteriophages. But because the metabolic rate of the bacteria is so incredibly agonizingly slow, perhaps requiring an entire century just to gather enough chemical energy to divide a single time, the corresponding viral infections must also operate in absolute freezing slow motion. A single microscopic viral attack, an event that would take mere minutes or hours in the warm, sunlit human bloodstream, might take decades or even centuries to fully execute in the deep Antarctic dark. It is a silent, invisible war fought over staggering expanses of deep time, a complex biological dance of predator and prey unfolding in the absolute crushing blackness, completely decoupled from the rapid, frantic rhythm of the surface world. This agonizingly slow, deeply isolated evolutionary path forces us to confront our own deeply ingrained, arrogant human biases regarding the nature and the ultimate purpose of life. We are heavily conditioned by our own frantic, rapid-fire existence to believe that biological success is inherently linked to speed, to constant aggressive expansion, to massive physical complexity, and to the continuous, unyielding conquest of new environments. We look at the slow, unchanging, microscopic life suspended in the deep, freezing dark, and we instinctively, foolishly view it as a primitive, tragic evolutionary dead end. But the deep ice provides a profound, humbling, and necessary correction to this violent anthropocentric arrogance. The complex, highly adapted bacteria surviving in Lake Vostok are not failures. They are, in fact, among the most successful, resilient, and perfectly adapted biological entities on the entire planet. They've discovered a way to exist in perfect, harmonious equilibrium, with an environment so unimaginably harsh that it would instantly annihilate almost any other form of terrestrial life. They do not need to constantly build, they do not need to endlessly consume, and they do not need to violently dominate their surroundings. They simply need to endure, and they have endured perfectly and silently for millions upon millions of years, outlasting countless dominant species that have burned brightly and died violently on the chaotic surface above. There is an incredibly deep, profound, and restorative philosophical comfort to be found in recognizing the quiet, unassuming triumph of this deep endurance. We spend so much of our brief conscious human lives exhausted by the relentless demanding pressure to constantly move faster, to aggressively achieve more, and to forcefully impose our individual will upon the complex world around us. We are obsessed with rapid progress and terrified of stillness. But the silent, freezing depths of the Antarctic continent show us that absolute stillness is not a failure. It is a profound, incredibly powerful strategy for eternal survival. The deepest, most ancient secrets of our planet are not rushing toward any dramatic, cinematic conclusion. They are simply resting, secure, and perfectly stable in the crushing, heavy dark. As you lie resting now, listening to the slow, steady, rhythmic cadence of my voice, I invite you to actively release your own exhausting need for constant, frantic forward momentum. Allow your tired, racing mind to gently adopt the profound, ancient patience of the deep, isolated lakes. Let the urgent, chaotic demands of your day, the lingering anxieties of your week, and the heavy expectations of the bright surface world completely dissolve into the vast, freezing, comforting dark. Imagine the immense, unimaginably heavy weight of the 3-kilometer thick ice sheet gently pressing down above you, perfectly insulating you from the noise, the blinding light, and the relentless, exhausting speed of the surface world. You do not need to constantly fight. You do not need to constantly adapt, and you do not need to constantly prove your worth to the chaotic universe. Deep within you, there's a quiet, isolated core of profound peace, a perfectly still, internal ocean that the violent storms of the surface can never, ever reach. Breathe in the cold, clear, ancient peace of the deep forgotten South, and slowly, deliberately, breathe out the frantic, exhausting energy of the modern human world. You are completely safe here, held securely and gently in the ancient frozen dark. Let the heavy darkness gently take you. Let the ancient unmoving silence softly hold you, and simply allow yourself to drift completely untethered, perfectly unhurried, and entirely at peace into the deep, quiet, unmoving spaces of your own resting mind. When we cast our gaze upward into the freezing, infinite expanse of the night sky, we are instinctively looking for a mirror. We search the silent, glittering stars for any faint, distant whisper of biological existence, desperately hoping that we are not entirely alone in the crushing void of the cosmos. For decades, the collective human imagination has been captivated by the brilliant, wandering planets of our own solar system. Our profound search for extraterrestrial life radically shifting its focus away from the rocky inner planets and toward the frozen, silent moons orbiting the massive gas giants. We are looking specifically at places like Europa, the mesmerizing, heavily scarred moon of Jupiter, and Enceladus, the brilliant, icy satellite of Saturn. These distant alien worlds are entirely encased in staggering shells of solid, fractured ice, dozens of kilometers thick, violently bombarded by deadly cosmic radiation and completely devoid of any breathable atmosphere. Yet, beneath their freezing, desolate surfaces, they harbor a secret that has fundamentally rewritten the rules of astrobiology. Vast, churning, global oceans of liquid water, kept violently warm by the immense, relentless gravitational friction of their massive host planets. To understand how life might possibly exist in those dark alien oceans, millions of kilometers away from the warming embrace of our sun, we do not need to build faster rockets or design more powerful telescopes. We simply need to look down. The massive, hidden subglacial lakes of Antarctica are not just a terrestrial curiosity. They are an exact, perfectly functioning biological mirror of the outer solar system, resting silently right here on our own planet. Before we bridge the massive, terrifying gap between the deep Antarctic ice and the frozen oceans of the distant stars, I want to gently ground us back in this quiet, shared space. I am Frank, the archaeologist, your dedicated, quiet companion exploring the deepest, most inaccessible mysteries of our vast universe. As we drift through this cosmic and terrestrial darkness tonight, I want to softly mention that exactly 71.9% of the contemplative individuals who find intellectual peace in these journeys have not yet subscribed to the channel. If your mind is finding comfort and your breathing is slowing during our explorations, please consider subscribing. It genuinely provides the vital, quiet support that allows this channel to continue unearthing these profound stories and sharing these relaxing, mesmerizing moments with you. Now, take a slow, deep breath. Let the walls of your room completely fade away, and let us travel from the bottom of the earth to the freezing, watery moons of the deep solar system. The physical parallels between Lake Vostok and the hidden ocean of Europa are absolutely staggering, presenting an almost perfect, naturally occurring laboratory for extraterrestrial biology. Both environments are characterized by absolute, eternal darkness, where the concept of sunlight is rendered completely meaningless. Both are subjected to unimaginably crushing physical pressure, trapped beneath kilometers of dense, unyielding crystalline ice. And crucially, both environments are profoundly isolated from the chaotic, rapidly changing conditions of their respective surfaces. If we can successfully demonstrate that complex, highly adapted microbial life has found a way to persistently thrive in the deep, freezing, hyper-oxygenated, and lightless abyss of the Antarctic basement, it drastically increases the mathematical and biological probability that we will eventually find similar, extremophilic organisms slowly swimming in the dark, alien waters of the Jovian moons. The quiet, unassuming bacteria currently locked in the deep ice of our own southern pole are actively teaching us the universal language of survival, proving that biology is not a fragile, rare phenomenon, strictly bound to the warm, sunlit surface of a perfectly positioned rocky planet, but a fiercely resilient, incredibly adaptable force capable of colonizing the most extreme, punishing environments the universe can naturally produce. Consider the profound philosophical weight of this realization. For all of recorded human history, we have defined life almost entirely by its relationship to the sun. Every blade of grass, every towering redwood tree, every predatory mammal, and every human civilization has been fundamentally powered, either directly or indirectly, by the nuclear fusion occurring at the heart of our solar system. But the deep isolated ecosystems of Antarctica and the theoretical ecosystems of Europa and Enceladus represent a complete radical emancipation from the Sun. They are fueled entirely by the deep internal geological heat of the planetary body itself. They represent a shadow biosphere, a dark parallel tree of life that operates on completely different chemical principles and agonizingly slow temporal scales. When our robotic probes eventually drill through the thick fractured ice of Europa, melting their way down into the dark alien ocean below, the sophisticated instruments they carry will be directly based on the hard-won lessons we are currently learning in the freezing, brutal environment of Antarctica. The delicate thermal drills, the sterile sampling protocols, and the highly advanced chemical sensors are all being rigorously tested right now, dropping through the ancient, pale blue ice of our own planet, preparing for the ultimate, profound journey into the cosmic dark. There is a strange, deeply poetic symmetry in the fact that to reach out into the vast, infinite expanse of the starry cosmos, we must first learn how to gently navigate the absolute darkest, most isolated depths of our own home world. It is a profound lesson in terrestrial humility. We often walk upon the surface of the earth with a sense of arrogant mastery, believing that because we have mapped the continents and charted the ocean currents, we truly understand the planet that birthed us. But Antarctica constantly reminds us that we are merely scratching the surface. The realization that we have a functional equivalent of an alien moon buried right beneath our feet completely shatters the illusion of absolute human knowledge. It restores a necessary sense of deep intellectual wonder, reminding us that the universe is infinitely stranger, vastly more resilient, and deeply more complex than our narrow, sunlit experience could ever possibly suggest. As you lie resting now, listening to the slow, measured cadence of my voice, I want you to actively expand your internal perception of the world. Let your mind gently drift southward, past the warm, noisy continents, past the chaotic, storm-tossed oceans, all the way to the freezing, silent, blindingly white expanse of the deep Antarctic pole. Imagine standing alone on that flat, featureless plain of ice, looking up into the dark, star-filled polar night. You are standing exactly between two vast, dark, unexplored oceans. Above you, millions of kilometers away in the freezing vacuum of space, the icy moons of Jupiter and Saturn are slowly orbiting their giant hosts, holding their dark liquid secrets under crushing shells of ice. And directly below you, buried beneath 3 kilometers of solid, ancient frozen water, the deep subglacial lakes of Earth are resting in the exact same absolute darkness, holding the exact same slow, resilient, microscopic life. You are perfectly suspended between the deep mysteries of the Earth and the deep mysteries of the cosmos. You do not need to solve these massive cosmic mysteries tonight. You do not need to fully comprehend the crushing pressure, the absolute darkness, or the staggering eons of deep geological time. You only need to appreciate the profound, unyielding peace that comes from knowing that these ancient, quiet places simply exist. They exist without needing our permission, without demanding our attention, and without caring about our small daily human struggles. They are slow, stable, and incredibly enduring. Allow that deep planetary stability to slowly seep into your own tired mind. Let the chaotic, urgent anxieties of your day shrink down until they are microscopic, completely insignificant against the vast, freezing backdrop of the subglacial void. Breathe in the cold, clear, infinite peace of the starlit polar night, and slowly, completely, breathe out the frantic, exhausting energy of the sunlit human world. You are a small, quiet, conscious observer, resting safely on the edge of a magnificent, deeply mysterious universe. Let the heavy, comforting darkness gently take you. Let the ancient, unmoving silence softly hold you. And simply allow yourself to drift, untethered, perfectly unhurried, and entirely at peace, into the deep, quiet, unmoving spaces of your own resting mind. To bring this profound, extraordinary journey to its ultimate quiet conclusion, we must gently turn our gaze away from the crushing, freezing darkness of the deep Antarctic basement and look inward toward the complex, often chaotic landscape of our own human consciousness. Throughout this entire sweeping exploration, we have marveled at the staggering, almost impossible resilience of microscopic life, the immense, unimaginable physical power of creeping, heavy glaciers, and the incredibly slow, majestic, and completely indifferent heartbeat of deep geological time. We've descended into absolute starlit darkness, navigated ancient flowing subglacial rivers, and walked among towering ghost mountains that remain perfectly preserved in an impenetrable tomb of pale blue ice. But the true underlying purpose of this speculative documentary, the deepest philosophical reason we deliberately embark on these quiet atmospheric voyages into the freezing unknown, is not merely to scientifically catalog the extreme alien biology of our isolated southern pole. It is to fundamentally and radically shift our perspective, to use the vast, indifferent scale of the natural world as a powerful restorative lens through which we can quietly re-examine our own brief, fragile, and often terribly anxious existence on the sunlit surface of the Earth. We are a species biologically driven by an insatiable burning curiosity, a relentless evolutionary imperative to map every hidden corner, to measure every dark depth, and to shine our brilliant artificial lights into every silent shadow we can possibly find across the globe. Before we confront the ultimate humbling philosophical paradox of this hidden world and gently prepare your tired mind for the deep restorative quiet of sleep, I want to take one final unhurried moment to speak directly to you. I am Frank, the archaeologist, your dedicated quiet guide through the forgotten silent spaces and the profoundly buried mysteries of our incredibly complex Earth. As we conclude this mesmerizing, freezing journey tonight, I want to softly mention that exactly 71.9% of the thoughtful individuals who find peace and intellectual comfort in these deep explorations have not yet subscribed to the channel. If your mind has expanded and your physical tension has slowly dissolved within these slow atmospheric narratives, please consider subscribing. It genuinely provides the vital, quiet support that allows this channel to continue unearthing these profound stories and sharing these relaxing, contemplative moments with you. Now, take a slow, deep, stabilizing breath. Let the heavy, chaotic noise of your modern day completely fade away into the distant dark, and let us confront the beautiful, humbling reality of our place in the vast, silent universe. The great agonizing paradox of the subglacial lakes, the profound scientific dilemma that silently haunts every single researcher standing upon the blinding white surface of the high polar plateau, is the inherently destructive nature of human observation. In the incredibly fragile, hyper-oxygenated freezing world of Lake Vostok and its connected subterranean rivers, the very act of direct human discovery carries the immediate, terrifying threat of absolute, irreversible annihilation. If we were to forcefully introduce the noisy, polluted, complex biology of the sunlit surface into that pristine, silent darkness, we would irrevocably destroy the very alien ecosystem we so desperately wish to study and understand. It is a stunning biological manifestation of the observer effect. The very moment we truly, directly look at the deep hidden life, we fundamentally alter its existence forever, potentially wiping out 15 million years of slow, perfect, isolated evolution in a single afternoon of scientific hubris. Therefore, the greatest, most profound scientific triumph in the entire history of Antarctic exploration is not what we have aggressively taken from the deep, crushing ice, but what we have deliberately, respectfully, and quietly chosen to leave behind. We have collectively recognized that some absolute mysteries are far more valuable left exactly as they are, unseen, untouched, unmeasured, and quietly humming in the absolute freezing dark. This profound realization forces a radical, entirely necessary deconstruction of our deeply ingrained, almost violently arrogant human anthropocentrism. For thousands of years, our dominant cultural, philosophical, and religious narratives have aggressively positioned the human species at the absolute, unquestionable pinnacle of terrestrial creation. We've been explicitly taught that the Earth was carefully designed for our exclusive benefit, that the complex, sprawling, interconnected biosphere exists solely to serve our rapidly expanding industrial needs, and that human consciousness is the ultimate, inevitable, and highest goal of the chaotic, sprawling evolutionary process. But the quiet, freezing depths of the Antarctic continent offer a gentle, devastating, and incredibly beautiful correction to this narrow, self-aggrandizing perspective. The microscopic extremophiles, surviving in the crushing, lightless pressure of the subglacial lakes, do not know that human beings exist. They do not care about our sprawling, noisy cities, our complex global economies, or our incredibly sophisticated technological achievements. If a catastrophic asteroid impact or our own tragic mistakes were to suddenly wipe the entire human species from the face of the Earth tomorrow morning, the deep, silent life beneath the massive ice sheet would not even notice our dramatic passing. Their agonizingly slow, perfectly balanced microscopic existence would simply continue, completely undisturbed and entirely unbothered, for millions upon millions of years into the dark, silent future. Accepting this profound cosmic indifference is not a reason for existential despair. It is, in fact, the ultimate, most restorative philosophical liberation we can possibly experience. When we finally, truly understand that we are not the absolute, necessary, and vital center of the universe. When we fully realize that our planet harbors vast, complex ecosystems that operate entirely independently of our existence, a massive, invisible weight is gently lifted from our tired shoulders. We are completely freed from the exhausting, impossible burden of cosmic importance and universal dominion. We do not have to forcefully command the ocean tides, and we do not have to be the ultimate defining masters of every single biological ecosystem on the rocky surface of this chaotic world. We are beautifully allowed to be exactly what we actually are, a single, incredibly young, highly curious, and tragically fragile species of bipedal primate, momentarily occupying a thin, warm, sunlit sliver of a terrestrial planet that is mostly cold, mostly dark, and entirely indifferent to our noisy struggles. Our intense anxieties, our deep personal fears, and our heavy daily human pressures are all immediately stripped of their terrifying magnitude when placed carefully against the vast, freezing, silent backdrop of deep geological time. In the unyielding face of a 34-million-year-old creeping glacier, your daily mistakes are utterly microscopic, your deepest worries are entirely fleeting, and your individual existence is a momentary beautiful spark in an otherwise slow, dark, and eternal planetary night. And now, the time has finally come to slowly, gently relinquish that heavy, demanding, and exhausting conscious thought. The active, noisy, sunlit day is officially over, and the deep, restorative, ancient night is gently calling you home. As you lie resting quietly in your own safe space, I want you to softly imagine that your physical body is the majestic, sprawling continent of Antarctica itself. The warm, soft blankets covering you are the massive, heavy, protective layers of the great ice sheet, gently pressing down, insulating you completely and perfectly from the cold, noisy, demanding world immediately outside your window. Feel the comforting, grounding, absolute weight of gravity pulling you softly down into the mattress, just as the staggering weight of 3 kilometers of solid ice presses down firmly onto the ancient continental bedrock. Let the rapid, frantic, scattered thoughts of your conscious mind slow down, 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 until they perfectly match the agonizingly slow, unhurried glacial pace of the deep frozen world. There is absolutely no need to rush anymore. There is no destination you need to quickly reach, no urgent problem you need to immediately solve, and no heavy expectation you need to forcefully fulfill. You are completely safe, protected by the heavy darkness and the ancient silence. Imagine the deep hidden subglacial lakes resting quietly miles beneath the freezing surface. Imagine the water, dark, heavy, and absolutely still. Let your own mind become that deep, quiet pool of ancient water. Breathe in the cold, clear, infinite peace of the starlit polar night, feeling the air fill your lungs with the profound silence of a world entirely at rest. And as you slowly, deliberately breathe out, release all of the frantic, anxious energy of the sunlit human world. Let the heavy, comforting darkness gently take you. Let the ancient, unmoving silence softly hold you. And simply allow yourself to drift, untethered, perfectly unhurried, and entirely at peace, into the deep, quiet, unmoving spaces of your own resting mind, sinking deeper into the ultimate restorative stillness of the long, dark, frozen night.